throughout 1 Samuel, what you see are chiasms. Remember chiasms? Chiasms like an X, right? It's kind of like that funky like that new Tower Terrace intersection where it's like all of a sudden you're like, what on earth am I? It's like you're crossing over. And so chiasms, meaning like throughout 1 Samuel, what you think God is doing, like someone is on top. Typically, they're the haughty ones, they're proud, and God is gonna bring them low. He's gonna humble them. And he's gonna take someone else who is humble and low, and he's going to exalt them. And so you see that all throughout, actually, 1 Samuel. You see it with Peninnah and Hannah. You saw it with Eli and Samuel. You saw it with Hophni and Phinehas, actually, in Samuel as well. You saw it with Dagon and God. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen it with Saul and David, right? Saul is the king on top, but is he godly? Is he pious? Is he prayerful? He is not. And God's gonna he actually has removed his blessing. He's gonna bring him low. He's gonna humiliate him. And we'll see that in today's passage. And he's gonna take a young guy, right? A guy that's little, ruddy, but he's got cute eyes, right? He's got cute eyes. I'm not saying anything. Boone, I'm not saying anything. And so, all right, so that's what we've been seeing. So you got over there, 1 Samuel 18, we're gonna jump in. And so remember, as what you've seen with David is that God has been so pleased to elevate this guy. I mean, he is elevated because he is faithful. Everywhere that God has placed him, God is just saying, I'm just gonna continue to elevate him. And so he has been a good son to his father as a shepherd. And as a shepherd, he is faithful and becomes a musician. That all of a sudden out in the field, like he is singing songs about who God is, and then some servants of Saul take notice of him. And so he gets asked to come into the king's court and to be a musician for Saul. So he's elevated from a shepherd to a musician. And from there, Saul loves him and becomes a musician. He becomes an armor bearer. And from an armor bearer, he becomes a national hero, right? He takes down the enemy. And from there, he's then exalted over all of Israel's army. He is a 5-star general. And so just really quick, like can God elevate and exalt a person in just a matter of seconds? He can. He can do that. But at the same time, can he make things change in a matter of seconds as well? He can, right? And just as fast as David is elevated, like something happens where things drastically change. And so the rest of chapter 18, we get this like a great passage to see how does David respond when things don't go the way that he thought and what he imagined. Because what we're gonna look at, I mean, right off the bat in like kind of chapter 18, Saul demotes David. There's a demotion. And it's not because David messed up. It's because David has been so successful, Saul is jealous of David's work. And so remember in chapter 18, it's like they come back after another battle and the people are singing and they're praising God for deliverance. And they're singing that Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Right? I don't know what that ditty sound like. It doesn't sound like a stanza that sounds real catchy, but it infuriates Saul because David is receiving more glory and more fame than he is. And so what does he do? He demotes him. He's no longer gonna be the 5-star general. He's like, just get a segment of people. He's gonna lead just like a people of 1,000. And so David's response though, it's remarkable. It's like we just get like a glimpse, like just an inside look at this guy's character. He has done nothing wrong and his job is being removed. So David's response, he's gonna continue to be faithful even though there's unjust treatment. What would a lesser man do? You think a lesser man would gripe and complain if they lost their job? Or maybe what would a lesser man do if they didn't get the job that maybe they deserved? Right? And so right here, a lesser man would not just gripe and complain. You know what a lesser man would do? He'd just start a coup. Like, I'll just start my own thing. Do the people love him? Right? The people love him. Can he gather probably the rest of the nation and just kind of overthrow Saul? I assure you, he probably could. But he's not going to. He's just going to be faithful where God has placed him. And so, I mean, I don't know about you, that's varsity ball right there. Because when things don't go the way that we think, the way that we hope, or what we deserve, or what, man, we work hard, we deserve that spot, and we don't get it, right, we get angry. And David, he just takes it right on the chin. And in verse 19, it actually gets worse. It's not just that Saul demotes him, right? Saul now disrespects him. In verse 19, remember what was promised to David because of what he did. Because he took down the enemy, because he conquered the strong man and defeated the evil one, the enemy of God. You remember what he was promised? He was promised to be free, like his household is gonna be free of taxes. But not just that they don't have to pay tax, he was promised something else. He was promised to be part of the king's house, meaning he was promised a daughter from Saul. He's like, you are gonna get my firstborn daughter. He was promised Merib, and now Saul has withdrawn his promise. He's taken it away. He's no longer gonna be a part of the king's house. And so he's not just demoted, he's disrespected. And he's not just disrespected, he's deceived. Because in verse 20, we see something else. He's like, oh, wait, I do have a daughter that I want to give you. Saul catches wind that Michal, his other daughter, loves David, just loves him. And so it's not as though Saul has a change of heart. This is why he says, I'll give you Michal in verse 20. Now, Saul's daughter, Michal, loved David. And they told Saul, and the thing displeased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she might be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore, Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. And so he just removed being a son-in-law in like the verse earlier. And it's not because Saul has a change of heart. It's like he looks and he says, okay, Michal loves David. I'll give her. Now, he does not obviously have a high view of his daughter. He's like, I'll give her to him and she's gonna be a snare to him. Right? You remember, Michal is she's probably more like Saul than unlike him. She's not a very spiritual woman. In fact, she has household idols. In fact, I think it's in chapter 19, 13, like she uses those household idols to deceive like the servants of Saul. But here's the reality. I think Saul recognizes that here's a lady I could give David, and she will be a snare, meaning she will take these household idols and bring them into their marriage, and it will kind of like hopefully woo the heart of David away from God. And if his heart's away from God, then the blessing of God won't be upon David, and the Philistines can take him out. That's how deceptive this guy is. So he gives his daughter to David, but notice, okay, I'll give you my daughter, but there's a bride price, right? There is a dowry, right? There is a kind of a payment for the daughter. You see it in verse 25. Interesting dowry right here. Then Saul said, thus shall you say to David, right? The king desires no bride price. Oh, I like that. Right? No bride price. Oh, except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he might be avenged of the king's enemy. Now Saul thought to make David fall before the hand of the Philistines. All right, so like during this time, there's a dowry, there's a bride price. Like, and so for Michal, this is my bride price for you, David. It's not ox, it's not cattle, right? It's not sheep or rams or a camel. It's like, you know what you're gonna give me? 100 foreskins. 100 foreskins, right? It's in the text right here. That's an interesting bride price, right? Saul wants David to circumcise, right, their dead bodies. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a hard bride price. That's not something that I'd want to do, right? I will say that fathers, dads in the room, you have a young daughter, right? This is a verse I'm going to memorize right here. It's in the text. It's God's word, right? So here, right? Just keep this in mind for those of you who want to marry my daughter. All right. Incidentally, I also made a little note here. You know, I don't think there's a Veggie Tales episode of this biblical passage. Just saying, just saying, right? There's no, like, if you're an artist in the room, like, this is not I haven't seen any Rembrandt or Van Eyck on being painted on canvases. And so, like, here, does David meet the bride price? Actually, no. He doubles it. He doubles it. He doubles the dowry. And so I'm hoping he delegated that responsibility, but nonetheless, here we go. And so what do we see is like his plans, they backfire on him. In fact, verse 28 and 29, you see like Saul, because he is seeing like the hand of God is clearly upon this young man. It's like Saul is now terrified. He's frightened. He's paranoid. And rightly so. It's not just because Michal loves him, it's because everything and everywhere David go, he's victorious. And everywhere he goes, it's like you see like the hand of God is clearly upon David. And not only is like his daughter loves him, the nation loves him, he's seen victory. In verse 30, right? This is a fascinating verse. Verse 30, then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle. And as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. Like, that's a strange verse, right? So that verse is saying something to me that I didn't catch right away, right? It says that David had more success than all the servants of Saul, and therefore his name was esteemed. Some translations actually say it a little bit differently. It says David behaved himself more than all the servants of Saul. Like, and so even the Philistines, it seems as though that when he was going out to battle, even the Philistine people recognized that he is different than all the rest of the people. It's like even he's gaining like esteem and high like regard even amongst the enemies of God. And the reason I say that is because you tie verse 30 to chapter 19, verse 1. That's strange to me because Saul's now gonna double down on trying to destroy David. He's like, you know what? It didn't work in the past, but I'm gonna try it again. Like David is a dead man. And so what does he do? He doesn't now try to deceive and try to actually get the hands of the Philistines to kill him. He's like, I'm gonna kill him. And so he pronounces actually like an edict saying he's a dead man. You see that in 19:1? And Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son. And not just to Jonathan, he spoke to all of his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. All right, I think Saul is trying to capitalize on what we had just seen in 1830. Right? Meaning, I think he's trying to use what's happening in Philistine land to actually paint David in a negative light. I think he's trying to show his servants and his household that actually David is nothing more than an imposter. He's a fraud, right? He's not a servant of Israel. He's actually an enemy of the state. Because in my mind, it does not make any sense at all that Saul can give an edict to like his people, his servants, like, let's kill David because David's loved. But I think the fact that the Philistines now are having high regard, he's like, I can use this opportunity to say, you know what? He's deceiving us all. And so we need to take him out. But someone comes to his defense. Someone comes to his aid. Who comes to his aid? His buddy, Jonathan. Right? Jonathan loves David. He loves him. And you just think, who has the most to lose from the rise of this guy? Jonathan does. Right? Jonathan has everything to lose. He's no longer, if he's going to actually bend his knee to the king, he's going to actually kind of let David come to the throne, he loses kingship, he loses his robes, he loses his position, he loses everything. And yet Jonathan loves David. He loves him. Verse 2, you see it. And Jonathan told David, right, Saul, my father, he seeks to kill you. Therefore be on your guard in the morning, right? Stay in a secret place, hide yourself. And so Jonathan's like, he's revealing the plans to David. He's like, I know what my daddy's up to. He has ill favor towards you. He wants to take you out. He wants to kill you. He wants you dead. Which is why throughout the last couple weeks I've said, you want to jot this down. Jonathan is a great picture of the church. Right? He is a picture of us. He is a picture of the church of the people of God. Why do I say that? Because he is the first to do something, which we as a church are the first to do something. What? It's to bend our knee to the rightful king. When everyone else is rejecting the true king, right? Jonathan is the first to say, no, you are the rightful king. And that's what the church does. The church does that with Jesus. And it's not just that he's the first to bend the knee. Notice what else? He's going to actually represent David in a positive light, even during hostility. He's going to actually kind of paint a true light against hostility. You see that in verse 4. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David. Why? Because he has not sinned against you. Because his deeds have brought good to you. And so now what does he do? In the time of hostility where Saul wants to take him out, what does Jonathan do? He intercedes. He says, no, he's like, you have no right to do this. He defends David. Right? He uplifts him. Like he brags about him. He says, why would you kill him? He laid down his life for us. He's the one that actually conquered the enemy, right? He is an innocent man and he has brought deliverance. So do you see, again, he is just a picture of the church. He's not just bending his knee, the first to bend the knee to the rightful king. He is the one who says, you know what? Why would we not lift him up? Why would we not exalt him? Why would we not bend the knee to him, even during hostility, saying he died for us, right? He conquered the enemy. He is an innocent man and he is not deserving of death. He actually delivered us. So there is a brief season right here. It's like Saul has like this brief season of sanity, right? He pauses for a moment. And so there is almost like there is just a really small window where persecution is now going to be withheld. In verse 6, you see it. And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, as the Lord lives, as the Lord our God lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in the presence as before. And so he goes back into Saul's house. Now in verse 8, right, we see that there's a war again, another battle. It's going to be another battle against the Philistines. Now, I don't know about you, but look at verse 8 now. How would you feel? So a war breaks out again, and David went out, and he fought against the Philistines, and he struck them with a great blow, so that they fled before him. Now, that verse causes me, honestly, just to scratch my head a little bit. So here's my encouragement. I hope that throughout the week that you're just kind of like reading through 1 Samuel. So this next week, start reading 1 Samuel 21, 22. And so when I'm reading this, I mean, wouldn't it be, wouldn't your natural, you hear, let me restate this. War breaks out again, and Saul needs someone to go to war. Would you want to fight for Saul? I wouldn't. That'd be like, fight your own battles. What have you done for me that I should fight for you? Right? You've done nothing but actually, you've demoted me, you've disrespected me, you've deceived me, you've actually devised plans to kill me. And now you want to use my skills to actually go to war? I'd be like, thanks, but no thanks. Right? And that's not how David responds. Because that's not his heart. And that's not his character. Which is why it's like when we pause and we reflect and we just slow down a little bit, I think it's like, do you see why God says this is a man after my own heart? Because what does David do? Because I wouldn't go, but David goes. David denies himself. David is a great servant. He's a faithful servant. Success hasn't gone to his head. He has done all these great things, and he doesn't say, you know what, I'm better than this. I'm not gonna put myself in harm's way for this guy. That's not his actions, it's not his heart, it's not his attitude. Right? And so the reason he goes is because he's faithful and he wants the enemies of God taken out. He's faithful to take his cues from God and not from his circumstances, right? How often do circumstances and the situations that we go through like actually dictate like how we are gonna live and how we're gonna act? A lot. Like throughout the week, right? We go through all types of situations and all types of circumstances, and those circumstances produce usually a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings, and those feelings can then dictate how we're gonna live and how we're gonna act, how we're gonna respond to others. And David does not respond that way. David takes his cues from God and God alone, not circumstances and nor his feelings. And so I don't know about you, like I am thoroughly convicted when I read texts like this, because I can so easily be like, based upon how my day is going, then respond just out of my emotions. And that's not David. That's not his heart, that's not his character. In verse 19, or actually verse 9 of chapter 19, you'll notice there's a spear now in Saul's hand. Why is there a spear in his hand? Because Saul is paranoid. Saul is afraid. Saul is just a madman. He's a mad dog. He's lost it, right? And so he's ready to kill. He's a murderous man, but you notice like there's a contrast. There's a spear in Saul's hand. What's in David's hand? A harp. Why is there a harp? It's not just because he's a musician. Like you're meant to see something. Like there's a harp because he's there to actually be a blessing to the person that actually hates him. Like you remember, he sings songs to Saul so that truths about who God is can actually calm his soul and take that which is paranoia and fear and maybe shame and actually sing the truths of God over him. He's remarkable. And so here's a guy who's actually, it's amazing that he's actually trying to bless the person that despises him. Verse 10, and Saul sought to pin David to the wall with a spear, but he eluded Saul, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. So right here, David flees. He flees in the night. It's like David from now on, really almost throughout the rest of this whole book, it's like he's on the run. He is just fleeing for his life because he is an enemy of the king. He is an enemy of the state. And even though he has to flee, what we're gonna see over and over is that God is with him. That God is gonna sovereignly protect David, even though Saul is gonna ruthlessly pursue him. That God has this like providential protection over David, because can anything happen to David? Can Saul actually kill David? No, because he's already anointed king. He's going to be king someday. He's got to wait. God has a plan for him, but he's on the run. And so God is going to sovereignly protect this guy. He's done it through Jonathan already in verse 2. He's going to do it again through this person right here in verse 11. Who's he going to bring it from? Michal. Verse 11. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, if you do not escape tonight, tomorrow, you're a dead man. So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled away and escaped. And so right again, it's like Saul is devising this plan to take David out, and yet Jonathan saves him. And not just Jonathan, now Michal saves him. And in verse 18, we're gonna see another person God's gonna use to save him. In verse 18, he's gonna use the seer. He's gonna use the prophet of God. He's gonna use Samuel. You see that in 18? Now David fled, he escaped. He came to Samuel at Ramah, and he told him all that Saul had done to him. It's like, so he's fleeing for his life. He's on the run. He knows that Samuel's at Ramah. He goes there, and it's like there he just he spills the beans to Samuel. He's like, man, Saul's after me. And he just kind of shares like all the things that has happened. He demoted me. He disrespected me, right? He's deceived me. He's devising now plans to kill me, right? And so in verse 19, what's true of earlier is like Saul then catches wind, is like, oh, he's in Ramah? All right, I'm going after him. Verse 20. Then Saul sent messengers to take, right? To take. Is that mindful of anything? Remember what Samuel said chapters earlier? He's like, you don't want a king. You don't take a king. You don't need a king like the Gentiles, because why? Because kings take. That's what kings do. They'll take your daughters, they'll take your men, they'll take your money, right? They take. And right here, you see it again. Saul sent messengers to what? To take David. He's a dead man. And when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as the head over them, the Spirit of God moved in such a way upon the messengers of Saul that they also prophesied. So here, Saul is sending messengers, which was basically soldiers, to take David, to kill David. It's like all of a sudden, the Spirit of God does something unique right here. The Spirit of God like overpowers these enemies. And what do? It's not just that they leave. He overpowers these enemies and they begin to worship. It says that they prophesize. It's like the Spirit of God thwarts the evil intent of these messengers. It says that they prophesied. Like honestly, what does that mean? Like, what were they saying? We're not told. We're not told what they're saying, but what I think would be said would be like, I think what they would be declaring is that they would be declaring or prophesying or speaking forth the glories of God and how David is going to be exalted as king. I think that's what they're prophesying. I think they're just speaking of God's greatness, God's deliverance, and the exaltation of David to be the rightful king. And so the Spirit of God thwarts their evil intent, and they go back. And what does Saul do? He sends more messengers, same thing happens again. They go back, he sends more messengers, same thing happens again. 3 times Saul tries this. And I think Saul decides in verse 22, it's like, I'm above all this. If I'm gonna get something done, I'm gonna do it myself. I'll take him out myself. I'll do what my people cannot do. And so he's like, I'm gonna go kill him. And in my mind, I don't think that he's just gonna kill David. I think he has every intent, I'll take Samuel out as well. And so, because he's paranoid, he's a murderous, mad man. And so, what does God do? God is faithful to protect. He's gonna use now Samuel. In verse 23, and Saul went there to Naioth in Ramah. And the Spirit of God came upon him also. And he, meaning Saul, went and he prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he too was stripped off of his clothes. And he too prophesied before Samuel. And he laid naked all the day and all that night. Right? That's kind of a bizarre verse right there. And what I think's happening right here is remember, Saul's has every intent as he's going to Ramah to actually take David out. What do you think he's saying as he's walking there? In my mind, I'm just trying to play out a possible scenario. I don't think he's just talking stuff. God is my witness. This guy is a dead man. God as my witness, I am gonna kill this little pipsqueak. Right? And as he's walking there, it's as God is my witness, I'm going to take out this man. As God is my witness, this guy is going to be exalted and he's going to take me out. It's like all of a sudden, I think he's just all of a sudden the Spirit of God rushes upon him where he begins prophesying the same thing the messengers are. Like the exaltation of God and how David is going to be the rightful king. And it says, the Spirit of God stripped him naked, right? To which I would say, all right. Kind of reminds me of even the book of Hebrews. It says everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. Why does God strip him naked? I think it's to show him that he is completely defeated. He's just been whooped really bad. And when you take your clothes, that's when you really got whooped. And not only did he get whooped, like not only is he defeated, like he's humiliated. Like there is a humiliation here. Like the Spirit of God has thwarted not just the messenger's plan, it has thwarted the evil intent even of Saul. So, a violent person that was uttering words now, actually those words are like turned on its head. Can you think of another time, actually in the New Testament, where someone in the New Testament actually utters words of evil intent, but those words actually become like a prophetic truth? Can you think of another time? Said of Jesus. Remember what was said of Jesus? It says, he must die so that the people may not die. Who said those words? The high priest, Caiaphas. Right? The same thing. So can God use kind of wicked people to profess like truths? Yeah. Right? God can prophesy through wicked men. He did it with Caiaphas. He did it with Balaam. And he's going to do it right here. He did it right here with Saul. So David is protected, but he's on the run still. He still has to flee. And so what we're seeing is like David is going to be removed from everything that's precious to him. Like David's going to be like, he's going to have to learn like to trust God when he's all by himself. God's going to take all these earthly reliance that aren't bad, but it's like he's going to remove all these things. He's like, I want you to trust in me and me alone. Because, I mean, if you just think about, look at all the things, and we're going to see more, look at all the things that God took from him. Took his job, took his house, he took his wife from him, took Samuel. In just a few seconds, he's going to take even Jonathan, his best friend. Which is why if you have like margins that you can jot down some notes, right after verse 10 of chapter 19, you know, you can play right by verse 10, put Psalm 59. That's what David penned during this time. He wrote Psalm 59, and that psalm is all about, it's like, my hope and my stronghold is God and God alone. He is my only hope. He's my only reliance. And so God right here is just separating this man from everyone and everything. And so he gets a conversation here with Jonathan in verse 18, and he's actually going to now use Jonathan to protect David. In verse 10, verse 18, then David fled from Naioth to Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, what have I done? Like, what's my guilt? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? Like, why on earth is your dad trying to kill me? I've done nothing wrong. Like, he's the innocent sufferer. And so Jonathan doesn't believe him. He actually doesn't think like, I don't think my dad's trying to kill you, because he would have told me if he was trying to kill you. And David lets him know, like, nope, that's not the case. In verse 3, chapter 20, but David vowed again, saying, your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he thinks, right, I don't tell Jonathan any of this, because if he knows, he'll be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, as the Lord God lives, and as your soul lives, there is just but a step between me and death. Your dad is trying to kill me. He has cut you out of the loop, out of the in the know, because he knows how you feel about me. I am just a fraction away from death. And so they devise a plan now. David's like, I got a plan. Let's devise a plan that's of divine test, saying like, this is how we're going to know whether or not your daddy actually wants me dead or not. It's found in verse 5. Here's the proposal. Tomorrow's a new moon. I should not fail to sit at the table with the king, right? We should all have dinner together. But let me go, that I might hide myself in the field until the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, hey, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. And he says, good. If he says good, then it'll be well with your servant. But if he's angry, then you know he's determined harm for me. And so here, I mean, it's a real simple test, right? This is a time where they could have dinner together, and if he's not showing up, Saul's gonna say, where's David? And Jonathan's gonna say, well, I gave him permission to go back to Bethlehem so that they could have a yearly sacrifice. If he's happy with it, if he's like, okay, that's fine, then all right. Saul is no longer angry, he's no longer trying to take his life. But if he's hot and if he's mad, then you know very well he wants to kill me. Now, this whole proposal is not an outlandish, it's actually a good excuse, right? It's not something abnormal. This is something Saul should approve. He should have no problem with, but he explodes in anger because he wants this guy dead. And his anger is manifested in verse 30. Look what it comes out. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. And he said to Jonathan, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? I mean, he lashes out at his boy. I mean, this is a curse. You son of a perverse woman. Like Jonathan is being slandered for what? For aligning himself with the rightful king. Jonathan is being slandered because he loves this king. He loves David. And so in chapter 19, Jonathan was actually able to use words to console the king. He was able to counsel his dad, right? That's no longer the case any longer. He can no longer bring appeasement, placation, like that doesn't work. And so Saul sees Jonathan's honor to David as an evil event. It's evil. And it's not just evil, it's foolish. Do you see that? He's like, you are dumb for aligning yourself with this king. And you're not only dumb, that's a wicked act. How dare you bend the knee to the rightful king? And so, do you see again how Jonathan is a great picture of us? That we as God's people, we are the first to bend our knee. Others might say, nope, he is an enemy. No, we will be the first to rightly bend the knee to Jesus. And we won't just bend the knee to Jesus. What else will we do? We'll do what Jonathan did. We're going to actually put him in a positive light, even if it's hostile. We're going to say, why on earth would we not bend the knee to him? He's been nothing but good to us, right? He has given us life, right? He's delivered us from the enemy, right? He is the innocent sufferer that has brought salvation and deliverance. And not only that, do we paint him in a positive light, we're like Jonathan. He's like, even when there's hostility and there's cursing, and when people say, that's dumb, why on earth would you follow this king? He's like, because he's the rightful king. And I'm willing to actually not only be mocked for it, I'm willing to Saul's actually going to try to take his life. I'll die for this king. That's Jonathan. He's fantastic. And so, verse 33, you see how Saul responds. Saul hurled a spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father determined to put David to death. Jonathan has fully aligned himself with David. This is the true king. And no matter the cost, no matter the ridicule, no matter the mocking, no matter how foolish it might seem, no matter all the things that I might lose, I'm no longer going to be king. I have to actually kind of take off my robes for the one who is greater than I. I have to come lesser so that he might become greater. And I am willing to actually die for this person. So, Jonathan's great. And he is hot. In verse 34, Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger. He ate no food the second day of the month because he was grieved, not for himself. He was grieved for David because his father had disgraced him. How dare you talk about the king this way? So, I'm going to wrap her up. You can read the rest of the chapter. Verse 41, it's official. David is an outlaw to the nation. And for the next several weeks, we just see he is on the run. And how is God going to continually protect him? And how is God going to respond? Or how is David going to respond when things don't go his way? And so David is fantastic. And so here's kind of the big idea. I want to kind of give you the big idea so that you don't lose it. And I mean, we covered a lot of verses. I mean, just imagine, like, try to place yourself in David's shoes. Like, he has been stripped of everything. He's lost everything except his life. He lost his job. He lost his house. He lost his wife. He lost his spiritual advisor, Samuel. He's losing his best friend, right? God right here is actually severing him from everything that's dear to him. And yet, how does David respond? He takes his cues from God, not his situations, and not his circumstances, nor his feelings, right? He's just like, I'm going to trust you because you are good and you're faithful. That's incredible stuff. Let's pray and ask that God would do that with us. So, Father in heaven, your word is like a sword. It is like a sword. It is meant to judge the thoughts and to the attitudes of our hearts. Like everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of you, to whom we must give an account. And so my prayer, not just for myself, but for your people here who have trusted Jesus, that we would know, we would take our cues from you, that we would not look to our circumstances or to our feelings, but to know that you are good, right? We are going to be ruled by you because you're righteous and you know what's best for us. God, if there's anyone here that has not trusted Jesus, the Son of God who came, who died to defeat sin, Satan, and death, and to give a righteousness and a perfection we can't earn and nor do we deserve. God, if there's anyone here that has not trusted him, or anyone listening online who has not looked to him, oh God, would you direct their hearts to Jesus, the author, the perfecter of our faith, the one who loves and forgives and longs to extend grace so that we might have life. And that's my prayer. And all God's people said, amen.